We are live watching to you the response right now of what Hassan Nasrallah of Lebanon and the Hezbollah is saying in response to the assassination of one of the senior Hamas leaders. We're going to pick it up right now as it's happening, and then we'll get into today's session right after that. Gary, go ahead and run it.
Aqsa deluge, which happened on the 7th of October, as you know, it was started in a Qassam group or brigade supported by the other groups, the other brigades, Palestinian brigades. And the reasons for the deluge, they mentioned, it was mentioned by the leaders of Hamas and the other brigades, and I talked about that in the previous speech. And with regards to the 75 anniversary and the other the prisoners and the attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque and the risks of displacement of Gaza people, and to have an internal conflict within Gaza. And the main reason and true reason of it is to displace all, or the exodus of all Gaza people. In any case, their reasons, it was clear and known. On the 8th October, Hezbollah has entered a battle on the northern Palestinian occupied Palestine from the southern frontier of Lebanon. After that, the Iraqi resistance men in Iraq, they started in Iraq and Syria, and targeting the Zionist entity through the drones, and also those in Yemen by attacking that entity with is the challenge in the Red Sea. It is a very brave and very wise step and very influential, effective. And you know that what's happened, you know, you are following all the news. What's happening 3 months from 3 months ago is we have many martyrs, people injured, houses being demolished or destroyed, and in the south of Lebanon as well, we have the scene of threats and risks. On that, there is this steadfastness and the bravery and the resistance and the challenging spirit, and to feel disappointed or giving up, surrendering. Of course, the main one is Gaza and the other parts of axle of resistance. With these two scenes, there are results. We go in and we go and get lost or drown through the details. We want to see the scene in general. We don't want to look at the details. When we look at the greatness of the achievements and results or outcomes that have been achieved up to now, and what's going to be achieved later, then we will realize, we will know, we will be more satisfied that of the amount of martyrs that's been, whether it's in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Yemen. And I would like to mention the titles very quickly, because each item, it needs 1 hour talking.
So, okay, what we're seeing here is live coverage from the leader of the Hezbollah and he was giving a speech based on the assassination that was committed in his country yesterday. We'll cut from this right now and get back to it, especially if there's any if he gives any context about what he may do. But this is very, very important because it's one of the big issues that we need to discuss in today's session, actually, that we have set with our guest today, Ambassador Chaz Freeman, former U.S. ambassador, former senior State Department, senior Defense Department, one of the best, most knowledgeable people in the Middle East. And Mr. Ambassador, grateful to have you back on today, especially as this information is breaking right now.
Glad to be here. I think the situation is really very dangerous, not just in terms of Nasrallah, who has earlier committed to decisive response to any assassination by Israel of anyone in Lebanon. And now he's confronted with having to fulfill that promise. But you also have the explosion at the memorial service for General Soleimani in Tehran, which is widely suspected to have been carried out by Israel. 103 dead people, dozens wounded, apparently. I say widely expected or widely suspected of being carried out by Israel. I think at this point there's no proof that it was Israel that did this, but it's hard to think of anyone else who might have. So the war is widening. We see the actions of Yemen, which Nasrallah just praised. We see whatever he's going to do, probably some sort of intensified reprisal against Israel, and we see what may be an Israeli attempt to embroil us in a wider war with Iran.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that has been concerning from the very beginning and the outset, that this could expand beyond the Gaza Strip, which was horrific in its own right, about the extraordinary level of civilian casualties that have been going on, starting with Israel's own terrorist attack that happened on 10/7, but has gone in such a bad direction that the chance of war seems to be expanding. And the whole, I guess, title of this episode that we have today, before this announcement happened from Nasrallah, was that there seems to be either one way or the other. Either there's going to be a two-state solution of some sort, or there's going to be perpetual war. And now, as it's turning out, even before we've had this episode, it's looking like it might not just be perpetual war, but expanded and perpetual war. And we've gotten into this problem here that's kind of a growing situation. And really, to underscore the difficulty that we're in, and I think the even more alarming situation the U.S. is in, for reasons that may not seem obvious, is the own capacity of the United States, both militarily and diplomatically. Now, back on I guess a couple of months ago, after there was the civilian attack against Israel had happened, 60 Minutes had a piece on with the President of the United States, and he was asked, can we do both supplying everything that Ukraine needs and everything that Ukraine needs? And the president was pretty emphatic. He said this.
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world.
So there's apparently nothing that we can't do. So we can do whatever we want. Then on New Year's Eve, he added this.
Well, my hope is that everybody has a healthy, happy, and safe New Year. But beyond that, I hope that they understand that we're in a better position than any country in the world to lead the world. And we're coming back, and it's about time.
So we're the only country in the world that can lead and can provide help for the country. And we're the greatest nation in the history of the world. So it would seem that whatever we're going to say out loud means that we're going to be able to accomplish the things that we want. And here is one of the key things. I'm going to show you three separate, very short pieces here of both the president and a couple of senior advisors saying exactly what the United States wants and what they don't want. Here's what President Biden says that he does want.
I made it clear to the Israelis that to Bibi and to his war cabinet that I think the only ultimate answer here is a two-state solution that's real.
And we had Sullivan coming on, the National Security Advisor, saying what we want to happen within the Palestinian Authority. I'm sorry, within the Gaza Strip.
We do believe that the Palestinian Authority needs to be revamped and revitalized, needs to be updated in terms of its method of governance, its representation of the Palestinian people, and starting with the president, Mahmoud Abbas, who I will go see. And ultimately, it's going to be up to the Palestinian people to work through their representation, and it will be up to those leaders of the Palestinian Authority to work through the types of steps that they need to take to reform and update the authority for the situation we face today.
And here's what Kirby said the United States doesn't want to happen.
We don't want to see, and the president has been very consistent on this, we don't want to see a reoccupation of Gaza by Israel. We think that's not only not good for Israel, it's not good for the people of Gaza. So we do not support that. What we do support is some sort of governance in Gaza long term that includes the voices and the votes and the self-determination of the Palestinian people. Now, what does that look like? We don't know yet. We're asking ourselves those questions literally every day as well, and we're going to continue to talk to our Israeli counterparts about that. But we've been very clear, reoccupation of Gaza is not in the best interest of anyone.
So the United States, as a quick reference point here, wants a two-state solution. We want a revitalized of the Palestinian Authority, and we don't want an Israeli occupation after the war's over. Those are the things that the most powerful nation on the history of the planet, and that is the only country that can provide leadership. Here's how the Israelis are responding to what we asked for. First of all, we have an ambassador to the UK from Israel who says, here's what she says about Israel's desire, the U.S. desire for the two-state solution.
Two-state solution? Is there still a chance for a two-state solution?
I think it's about time for the world to realize the Oslo paradigm failed on the 7th of October, and we need to build a new one. And in order to build a new one...
Does that new one include the Palestinians living in a state of their own? Is that what it includes?
I think the biggest question is, what type of Palestinians are on the other side? This is what Israel realized
do they have
on the 7th of October. The answer is absolutely no, and I'll tell you why.
Well, then
because
how can there be peace?
No two-state solution. And now then for the rest of it, and Netanyahu is very unapologetic to what he says he wants to do.
שום דבר לא יעצור אותנו. אנחנו הולכים עד הסוף, עד הניצחון. לא פחות מזה. אנחנו ממשיכים עד הסוף. אין בכלל שאלה כזאת. ואני אומר את זה גם נוכח הכאב הגדול, אבל גם מול הלחצים הבינלאומיים. אנחנו הולכים עד הסוף, עד הניצחון. לא פחות מזה.
So you had him straight up saying, no international pressure, i.e. Washington, D.C., and no one's going to stop us, and we're going to do whatever we want. And, oh, by the way, just keep giving us all the money we ask for it, and we'll do whatever we want. Is there any chance, Mr. Ambassador, that we are going to be able to accomplish the things that we want and hold Israel accountable so that the war doesn't expand?
Not if we continue to write blank checks, not if we continue to supply them with the weapons to carry out genocide, not if we support them in international organizations in their effort to starve the Palestinian people of Gaza into fleeing across the border into Egypt or somewhere, and not if they continue, not if we support indirectly the idea that the Palestinians should be relocated, transferred, as the Israelis put it. No. Israel will continue to be intransigent.
And there's another statement here in recent days by one of the members of Netanyahu's core, where he said that actually, we see on the screen here where the defense minister has said that that Israel is being attacked in several directions, and that this is an ongoing war in the Gaza Strip, and that he's being attacked by 7 different directions, so they say. And very important, he notes Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Iran. And so we've seen it perpetrated in activity by the Israelis in, of course, Gaza, Lebanon a couple of days ago, Syria several times ago already, and now then specifically Yemen, Iran, which has been attacked by someone today, and Iraq. And Iraq actually came out in support of Yemen today, in support of Iran today, which was kind of an eye-opening that, we have our own troops there, and yet the first thing they do is immediately say that they're on the side of Iran, which used to be a big catalyst. So it seems like we keep losing credibility in places across the board. Now, added to that, you had one of the ministers of Israel's finances, I think it was the finance minister, who actually says, "Hey, I know that there's 2.3 million people in the Gaza Strip right now. Well, how about if there's only maybe 100,000 left, and the other 200,000 will be leave in the country?" And he said this. Sorry, I kind of threw a curve on Gary there for a second, but one of their senior leaders said, "Yeah, we should get maybe 2 million. They should go somewhere else." So it doesn't sound like they're looking for even not else a two-state solution, but for them to even stay there. So
there's a very interesting retort to that in Haaretz, the great Israeli liberal newspaper this morning, which says that no, the transfer should be of the settlers. The settlers should go somewhere else, not the Palestinians. But it also appears that Israel has been negotiating with the Democratic Republic of the Congo and other African countries to try to bribe them with, probably at our expense if the normal procedure is followed, to take Palestinians out of Gaza. So I know that we have not directly opposed the removal of the Palestinians. We have said there should be no involuntary expulsion. And the Israelis are claiming that if they leave, it's voluntary. Of course, they have a gun to the head of the people leaving. So that doesn't seem to be very voluntary to me.
But Mr. Ambassador, let me ask. I mean, so far, Egypt has been absolutely unequivocal. The other Arab regimes have been very clear and unequivocal. They're not going to allow people to go into their countries. So if none of these countries will allow them to go anywhere, how can Israel even get
the lane stretches
the morality out of it for a moment? How can they actually get that done and still get them out of there? I don't know where they would go.
Well, I think they're prepared to starve a large number of them to death. They're prepared to create a humanitarian crisis that is so dreadful that the world can't ignore it, and then hope that the international community will step in and do their dirty work for them by removing the Palestinian 2.3 million Palestinians from Gaza. And while they're at it, they are, of course, trying to evict the Palestinians from the West Bank. Hundreds have been killed. Villages have been leveled. People in the West Bank report that they are being approached by settlers who tell them if they don't leave, they'll all be killed. And in many cases, they're leaving. So what is going on is a horror. And I think Israel wants to make it even more horrible in order to get the international community to intervene to take the Palestinians somewhere else.
Now, given the Israeli comment that they view that they have a 7-front war, does that imply to you that they may be actually thinking about not hoping that the war doesn't expand, but planning to expand it, whether that's in Hezbollah in Lebanon or possibly even Iran, and now add Yemen potentially to the list? And I don't know why they listed Iraq. That was a curious add to the list as far as I'm aware of. But America's primary vital national interest is to prevent the war from expanding. But do you think, what's your opinion, is Israel thinking of expanding the war on purpose?
I have 3 or 4 comments in response to that. First, normal states, which Israel is not, enjoy security because they have good relations with their neighbors. They don't violate their neighbors' sovereignty. They don't treat them with racist condescension. They deal fairly on a basis of equality with their neighbors. The Israeli approach is to hold a gun to the head of the neighbors and occasionally to shoot at them. And this is, in the long run, a recipe for the collapse of Israel, not its sustainment. That's the first comment. The second is that you asked the question why is Iraq included? Answer: the Israelis are dug into Iraqi Kurdistan. and they are also involved with our presence in Iraq, which is now under attack by people who sympathize with the Palestinians and who hold us responsible for sustaining the support for Israeli genocide in Gaza and pogroms in the West Bank. And the third point I'd make is that Mr. Netanyahu probably would welcome a wider war. He's fighting for his political survival. If the war ends, he ends. He may very well end up in jail because of corruption that there are multiple cases against him and his wife to be prosecuted. And finally, I think the war is a distraction for Mr. Netanyahu and the other extremists in charge in Israel from the internal political crisis that their effort to overrule judicial independence has produced. Now, the Israeli Supreme Court, to its credit, has refused to accept the legislation that these people passed. But this fight is not over, and the war is a great distraction from it. Now, I think there's maybe another factor here, and that is Israel is suffering greatly from this war. Not only is it taking many more casualties than it's admitting in Gaza, it turns out that Hamas militia is pretty well trained and pretty competent. And it's not as competent, perhaps, as Hezbollah has shown itself to be, but it's putting up a pretty ferocious resistance to the Israeli incursion and invasion and leveling of Gaza. Second, the Israeli economy is in real trouble. They've now had to demobilize 5 brigades because these were reservists.
Right.
And their absence from the tech sector is crippling the Israeli economy. Third, in terms of economic damage, Israeli tax revenues have fallen to near zero. The Houthi activities in the Red Sea have pretty much shut down all ship traffic to Israel. I'm told there's not a ship that's arrived in Eilat for 4 weeks. So I think the pain on the Israeli side, the politically relevant pain, is growing. Well, what's
this is ironically
the answer is get a bigger war, get it over with, get the United States in, attack Iran.
I can't imagine. Well, I can't imagine people thinking that way because there's all kinds of crazy things. But one of the things I've been arguing almost from the beginning is that even from the Israeli side, that they are pursuing a military strategy that cannot be accomplished and cannot be successful because there's the goals that they have set aren't militarily attainable figures. All it's going to do is build up more casualties for themselves, more destruction in the Gaza Strip, and build up all kinds of trouble for themselves. It's going to have to be dealt with at some point. But even militarily, if you try to succeed and destroy the Hamas, that doesn't even mean anything. Those are just words because you don't know who Hamas is. So they almost, however many they kill, there's no shortage of more people that are standing up whose family have been killed, who may have not even liked Hamas before. Now then, because their families are being killed, they, of course, are going to fight back. And I don't know how this could be successful. And the disparity between the military capacity of Israel and Hamas is off the scale higher for Israel, but they're going down a path that they may not be able to win long term. And if this expands into outside of that, I don't know how they continue to live, because you just correctly pointed out that this is causing them economic problems already. Their economy and jobs and all that, tax revenue, all that would be multiplied significantly more as long as we continue to provide whatever they need. And if we don't, this is not going to look well for Israel.
The other factor here that has to be taken account of is Israel has lost the moral argument that once sustained it. Israelis were seen as the descendants of victims of the Holocaust in Europe. Now they're seen as perpetrators of genocide in Gaza and brutal occupiers of the West Bank. I don't think Israel has come to grips with the fact that, and you could see that with their ambassador to Israel's adamancy about no two-state solution. I don't think they've come to grips with the fact that they are now essentially an international pariah. They're going to emerge from this war with the argument, their normal resort to charges of anti-Semitism, which worked because people sympathized with them, gone. Those are not going to work anymore. And the world, meaning the global majority, the South, but also Europe and many Americans, have lost faith in Israel, don't believe anything it says, understand that when it talks about a military operation being aimed at Hamas, that is just cover for genocide. It is not serious. It cannot be accomplished militarily, as you said. And it is probably creating a vast upsurge of hatred for Israel among Palestinians and other Arabs that will be seen in the form of future actions by them against Israel. Israel is not making itself more secure. It is jeopardizing its very existence.
Right. And I think we are definitely starting to see a change. There has been literally a reflexive, automatic support of Israel for decades, that no matter what has happened, we just always say, oh, yeah, the those Palestinian terrorists are bad guys and whatever. And most people don't even pay attention to it. Most things just, have a little spike and they're off the news. And that's just all we ever hear about. But now, because of how big and broad scale this is, and now it's being covered everywhere, a lot of those people are starting to change, especially among the youth who didn't grow up with this automatic reflexive support of Israel. They're turning against Israel in large numbers in America. And just yesterday, Senator Bernie Sanders published a statement. Gary, if you can bring up there, if you can throw that up real quick, where he issued a statement saying basically he thinks the United States needs to withhold some of the money that we've been promised, that Biden says. Here it is right here. He says that while we recognize that Hamas's barbaric terrorist attack began this war, we must also recognize that Israel's military response has been grossly disproportionate, immoral, and in violation of international law. Enough is enough. Congress must reject that funding. The taxpayers of the United States must no longer be complicit in destroying the lives of innocent men, women, and children in Gaza. Now, that would have been, an unheard of thing for any member of Congress to say, or in the Senate or House, until earlier on. But now he has been pretty direct and straightforward. Do you see this trend continuing?
I suspect it will. I mean, you see statements coming out of Israel. One of them you showed, that they intend to carry on this war for another year. Now, who's going to pay for that? I guess they expect us to pay for it. I guess President Biden expects us to pay for it. I think Bernie Sanders is speaking for a growing number of Americans when he condemns this, and I think that is likely to grow. Now, will Mr. Biden, who is a self-declared Zionist and is the largest recipient of Zionist campaign contributions in the history of the U.S. Congress over his lifetime, will he have the courage to stand up to Netanyahu and to halt American complicity in genocide? I'm not counting on it. So I think the divisions which we see spilling over, now we have university campuses, university presidents being fired or forced out of office because they don't toe the Zionist line. And let's be clear, it's not plagiarism that got President Gay of Harvard out of her office, although that was a convenient right-wing campaign tool.
Yeah.
No, it was her failure to agree with the entirely fictional charge that Jewish students at Harvard were somehow threatened. Palestinian students on American campuses are threatened. Nobody ever talks about it.
Yeah.
And I just read a statement from the University of California where a Jewish graduate student joined a pro-Palestinian demonstration, only to find that the demonstration was characterized as yelling death to the Jews and so forth, which he says didn't happen. He said he felt very welcome there. So I think we're seeing the limits of, President Lincoln said, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time.
All the time. Now, I wonder if, aside from, growing numbers of people, coming to realize that, hey, this is not the way we thought it was, and something needs to change. You also have the presidential campaign, which could actually throw a big monkey wrench into that, because Biden has had all this money from him in the past, and that's always been a big issue, part of their success. But they're creating so many more people coming against Biden, people who had been supporting him, that he could be losing more people by continuing, down this unchangeable road than he might at the other way. But it's probably also true that almost no matter which way that Biden goes, he's going to make somebody unhappy that could potentially cost him the election. But at some point, he's going to have to do something different, even out of self-preservation, to try and win this election. Because if he keeps going the way he is, I don't think he'll have much of a chance at all to win. Do you think that'll come into play to move things in a better direction?
This is the first time that I can remember where a foreign policy issue has really determined an electoral result. I mean, a foreign policy issue that the United States was only indirectly involved with. Obviously, the Vietnam War had a tremendous impact. It forced Lyndon Johnson out of office. This war could force Biden out of office. But I think at this point, the wise bet is on the victory for Mr. Trump, which Mr. Netanyahu wants, because he found Trump entirely manipulable. And unfortunately, there was a start made on normalization between Israel and its Arab neighbors by Jared Kushner, Mr. Trump's son-in-law, and that is completely dead. You see polling data from the Arab world. They have no sympathy whatsoever with their leaders' realpolitik decision to normalize relations with Israel. And so I think this is proving tremendously damaging. And I would say, going back to Mr. Biden's praise of our country, and I must, I spent 3 decades serving our country. I believed we were the greatest country. I thought we had enormous influence abroad. We had automatic followership on many, many issues. That's gone. We are losing it. So Israel is taking us down with it as it loses international acceptability. And you can see this. Look at the Red Sea flotilla that we've tried to put together.
Right.
Our convening power as a leader is at the lowest level I can recall. We had a bunch of countries that we said had agreed to join it, say they didn't want to be named. They wanted to remain anonymous. Then it turned out they hadn't really joined it after all. Then it turned out that nobody'd really joined it. This is not the leadership that Mr. Biden was talking about. I'm sorry.
I mean, bottom line, you're talking our friends. We don't have any influence over our friends. As we just showed at the top of this, all these things we told Israel we wanted, they didn't do any of them, and we're still giving them money. On the other side, in our deterrence, we're not doing anything to stop them. All these, little pinpricks we keep saying to send a message against our attacks in Syria and in Iraq against our troops, or down in the Red Sea. I mean, all of these things don't stop anybody. Nobody is concerned about what we're going to do, and our friends won't listen to us. Any way you want to look at it, the leadership of America is at a historic low.
I agree, but we make it worse when, for example, the Department of State rebuked 2 Israeli ministers for talking openly, as you mentioned earlier, about removing all but 100 or 200,000 Palestinians from Gaza and resettling the place. And their rebuke said, "Please don't talk like that." They didn't say,
"Don't say it out loud.
Don't do it." They didn't say that. They said, "You're embarrassing us by talking like that." But what those guys are saying represents Israeli policy. And if you believe Mr. Netanyahu is telling the truth, well, then you have to make sure that he's not moving his mouth, because if he moves his mouth, he's lying.
So let me ask you this. We're just about to run out of time for this episode here. But knowing all that you have seen through decades of experience in U.S. foreign policy, and all the time you spent, even since you officially retired, all you know about the internal politics in the U.S. with the historical stuff going on in Israel, where they seem to be right now as a government. What do you think is going to happen in even just the next couple of months? I won't even say the next year, but where do you think this is going in the medium term?
I don't think it's going anywhere but more of the same. And more of the same includes the hollowing out of our civil service. The people who make our government run are increasingly disgruntled. Even staffers at the White House, political appointees, have said this can't go on and demanded a ceasefire. So I think, the question you mentioned several times, giving Israel money. Well, frankly, we don't have any money to give them, but we are giving them bombs, and we're giving them artillery shells. And we have to stop that, or they're just going to continue doing what they're doing. There's an Israeli general who very openly said, look, you have to recognize that if the United States didn't supply us with all these weapons, we would have to stop this war. Well, we ought to.
Yeah, and that's because ultimately, I think, and I say this a lot in really almost every category, the government of the United States' primary responsibility is to defend our interest, to ensure our national security, our economic prosperity. And that means doing whatever it takes to ensure those things continue on, and not just to do what somebody else prefers, and no matter what the cost to us. And I think that a lot of people are starting to go, hey, this is not going to work. Now, how fast that can turn into action that could compel the government, our government, to start doing something different, I think is an open question. But I pray to God it comes quickly.
We've got two wars. Ukraine, which is going very, very badly in terms of what we intended and strove to achieve. This war in Gaza is an absolute disaster for us strategically. It is undermining our position globally to a horrendous degree. And January 13, we have an election in Taiwan.
Right.
That may produce a third war. And we have pushed the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians all together. North Korea is taking advantage of this. We are creating an axis of evil by our own evil.
And it's so perverse because we used to say that all the time, but before all this stuff especially happened, all of those countries you said were primarily kind of on their own. They weren't like working together actively, and now they keep going faster and faster. And I don't know that there's not any kind of an official alliance, but they certainly are working more and more together. And I think the longer it goes, it's not out of the question that could become one in the future.
Well, they have they have an entente, which is a limited partnership for limited purposes. And the limited purpose is to reject our global hegemony and dominance, and to do us nothing but harm. Beyond that, they don't agree about very much. Very different political systems, ideologies, different circumstances, different perspectives on the world. What they all agree about is that the United States has become an existential threat to them, and they're reacting to that.
And just with the least amount of wisdom, we could keep them focused on their differences between them and not working against us if we just would do just basic things and not try to make things worse everywhere else. I mean, if you want to provide leadership, if the president wants to do that, there's a lot better ways to do it that actually keeps our enemies or our opponents from working together against us, and to keep us keeping ourselves safe, and even our friends. Frankly, we could do a lot better to help them out, but we're doing none of them right now for our interest, and everything keeps getting worse. And I really worry about that. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming on and kind of laying things out in a stark way. I know a lot of the things that we talk about here, a lot of people don't like to hear. It makes people uncomfortable, but it's the truth. And we need to keep talking about things like this, the reality and the truth, that helps bring, the light on what's going on so that we can hold our leaders accountable. And as things keep going on, then, God willing, the people will be able to bring about a change. And that's what drives us here on this channel and why we're so grateful for having you on.
I wish I could say it was a pleasure to talk about these awful things, but I share your hope that we will wake up and correct what we're doing.
We do the same, and we have the same, and we're also grateful for you. And thank you for joining us today. We are continuing to be unintimidated and uncompromised to give you exactly the information you need. We ask you to like and subscribe and pass on to your friends so that they'll also get information here that you're just not getting anywhere else. And we will keep bringing it to you. We ask you to join us tomorrow. We're going to have another very interesting show here with our friend Matt Ho and also Daniel Bryan from the Project on Government Oversight. We're going to be looking tomorrow at this whole issue of the military industrial complex and where all this money's going. It's not just a bad idea. It's not just something that shouldn't happen. There are things that are happening right now, folks, that could undermine our national security and make us weaker, not stronger, even though we have such a big defense project. We'll show you how tomorrow. Don't look forward to joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.